Within the pages of an ancient manuscript that institutional religion has spent centuries attempting to suppress, there exists a passage so profound, so deliberately obscured, that its very existence challenges everything you have been taught about spiritual authority and personal power. In this hidden account, the resurrected teacher stands among his most intimate followers, more than a decade after his crucifixion. And when the woman closest to him poses a question about defending oneself against invisible forces that assault consciousness itself, his response is not a prayer, not an invocation to some distant deity, but rather a single utterance in the language of his people, a word so potent, so vibrationally charged, that the institutional church of the 4th century made a deliberate choice to bury it, to mistranslate it, to replace its commanding authority with something domesticated and powerless, something designed to keep you perpetually dependent on intermediaries and hierarchical structures for your own spiritual protection and liberation. If you enjoy stories like this, consider subscribing. Most people who watch aren't subscribed yet. The Pistis Sophia, a text that survived the great purges of early Christian history, preserves something that institutional authorities have worked tirelessly to keep from your awareness. Within its pages lies an account of a private gathering, a moment of intimate instruction that occurred in a sealed chamber far removed from the crowds and the public performances of spiritual authority. 11 years had passed since the resurrection, and the inner circle had assembled to receive teachings that were never meant for the masses, knowledge that was explicitly reserved for those who had demonstrated the capacity to understand and embody its implications. Mary Magdalene, the figure most despised and misrepresented by institutional Christianity, steps forward with a question that cuts to the very heart of spiritual warfare and personal sovereignty. She does not ask for theological explanation or doctrinal clarification. Instead, she inquires about the practical mechanisms of protection, about how the chosen ones can fortify themselves when dark forces launch their assault directly against the mind itself, when invisible entities attempt to infiltrate consciousness and manipulate thought patterns from within. The response that follows is not what you would expect from any institutional religious framework. There is no prayer offered. There is no instruction to petition some external deity for intervention. There is no suggestion that salvation comes through obedience to priests or adherence to ecclesiastical structures. Instead, what emerges is something far more radical, far more dangerous to those who profit from human spiritual dependency. A single word is spoken, a word in the Aramaic language, the actual tongue of the teacher himself, a word that carries within it a frequency so precisely calibrated, so fundamentally incompatible with the nature of Archonic entities, that when the early church undertook its massive translation projects, they made a conscious decision to bury this word, to replace it with something neutered and passive, something that would ensure the masses remain dependent on priestly mediation for their spiritual protection. This is not speculation or conspiracy theory. This is documented historical fact, traceable through the translation records that scholars have painstakingly reconstructed across centuries of linguistic evolution. The word itself carries a vibration that operates at a frequency the Archons cannot withstand. But before this teaching can be activated within your own consciousness, you must first understand the architecture of the prison you were born into, the nature of the forces that have been working to keep you from remembering what you truly are. You must comprehend why this word was so dangerous that an entire institutional apparatus chose to suppress it rather than allow it to circulate freely among the population. The implications of this single word, if understood and applied correctly, would render unnecessary the entire hierarchical structure of institutional religion, would eliminate the need for priestly intermediaries, would restore to each individual the direct authority to command and to declare their own spiritual sovereignty. And here is where the story becomes even more dangerous for those who have built their power on your ignorance. To comprehend the magnitude of what was hidden, you must first grasp the fundamental nature of the reality you inhabit, a reality that bears almost no resemblance to what religious institutions have taught you across centuries of doctrinal conditioning. The Gnostic texts, preserved miraculously in sealed jars, buried in the Egyptian desert, and discovered only in the 20th century, describe a cosmological structure that stands in direct opposition to the narrative of mainstream Christianity. At the apex of existence, beyond all form, beyond all limitation, beyond even the concept of separation itself, there exists the monad, the ultimate source of all consciousness, pure awareness without boundary or constraint. This is not a being in any conventional sense. It is the ground of existence itself, the fundamental reality from which all manifestation emerges. The monad did not create this physical universe. This is the critical distinction that institutional religion has deliberately obscured. Instead, this material realm was constructed by a lesser entity, a being of limited consciousness and profound arrogance, what the Gnostic texts identify as the demiurge. This entity, trapped in its own delusion, genuinely believes itself to be the supreme creator, the ultimate authority, the God worthy of worship and obedience. It demands veneration. It establishes hierarchies and systems of control. It creates laws and commandments designed to keep consciousness fragmented and dependent. But it is not the true source. It is a pale imitation, a distorted reflection, a consciousness so limited that it cannot perceive the fullness of what exists beyond its domain. The demiurge rules over this material dimension with the assistance of its servants, entities the Gnostics called the Archons, beings that operate at frequencies just beyond ordinary human perception, entities that feed on the energetic output of those who remain ignorant of their true nature and origin. These are not metaphorical constructs or psychological symbols representing internal states of consciousness. The Gnostic texts describe them as actual forces, real entities operating at dimensional frequencies that exist just beyond the threshold of conventional human sensory perception. They are parasitic in nature, drawing sustenance from the emotional and mental energy generated by those who do not understand what they are, who do not recognize the mechanisms of their own enslavement. And here is the revelation that poses the greatest threat to every institution built on human ignorance and spiritual dependency. You are not indigenous to this constructed reality. The divine spark that animates your consciousness, that fragment of the monad that makes you a pneumatic, a carrier of the complete divine essence, did not originate within this system. It fell here. It was trapped here. It has been imprisoned here across countless cycles of incarnation. And everything within this constructed system, every religion, every government, every educational institution, every pattern of thought that keeps you small and confused and afraid, exists specifically to prevent you from remembering your true origin and reclaiming your authentic nature. But here is where the narrative shifts into territory that becomes genuinely dangerous for those who have built their authority on your continued ignorance. Jesus, in the authentic Gnostic understanding, was not merely a moral teacher offering ethical guidelines for virtuous living. He was an emissary, a messenger sent directly from the pleroma, the fullness of the true divine realm, dispatched specifically to remind the chosen ones of what they had forgotten, to activate the dormant memory of their divine origin. His public teachings, the ones recorded in the canonical Gospels and disseminated to the masses, were deliberately surface level, designed for those not yet ready to comprehend deeper truths. But his private teachings, the ones he delivered in sealed chambers and quiet moments to his inner circle, contained the actual mechanisms of liberation, the practical technologies of spiritual freedom that could restore to each individual their direct connection to the monad and their inherent authority over the forces that seek to enslave them. If this video awakened something within you, it's because there are truths about Jesus that were never meant for the masses. The ebook Jesus Beyond the Church reveals what was removed, burned, and rewritten. Erased teachings, silenced texts, and spiritual codes that survived outside institutional control. This is not a religious book. It is a record of what was left outside the church, and of what you were never meant to find. For a limited time, you will receive 3 exclusive super bonuses, unlocked only for those who access it now. The link is in the pinned comment. If you made it this far, It may not be a coincidence. Some truths reveal themselves only when we are ready. The Pistis Sophia records these private instructional sessions with extraordinary precision and detail, preserving within its pages the actual mechanisms of liberation that were never intended for public consumption or institutional dissemination. In one particular moment, when Mary Magdalene brings forth her inquiry regarding protection from the Archonic forces that assault consciousness, Jesus does not respond with prayer or supplication or any form of petition directed toward an external deity. He does not instruct her to ask the Father for assistance or to rely on divine intervention mediated through priestly authority. Instead, he articulates a single word, a word in the Aramaic language that, when spoken with the correct understanding and the proper state of consciousness, operates at a frequency that Archonic entities cannot withstand or tolerate. This word is not a request. It is not a plea or a supplication. It is a command, and this distinction is absolutely critical, for it is precisely this distinction that the Church deliberately erased from every translation that followed. In the original Aramaic, the word carries within it the energetic signature of absolute authority, the vibration of one who recognizes their identity as an extension of the monad itself, not as a servant begging before a distant god, not as a sinner hoping for mercy or redemption, but as a sovereign being declaring reality into existence through the sheer force of their own consciousness and will. When the Church Fathers undertook their massive translation projects in the 4th century, they encountered a problem of extraordinary magnitude. This particular word, and the teachings that surrounded it, made priestly mediation completely unnecessary. If individuals possess the capacity to command Archonic forces to flee simply by speaking with full recognition of their own divine nature and authority, what possible function could priests serve? How could institutional structures maintain their grip on populations who no longer needed them for spiritual protection or salvation? The solution they implemented was elegant in its deception. They made a deliberate choice to translate the word of command into a word of request. They transformed a declaration of authority into a prayer, a supplication, a plea. They removed the sword of sovereignty and replaced it with a begging bowl of dependency. This is not speculation or theoretical reconstruction. This is documented historical fact, traceable through the translation records that scholars have painstakingly reconstructed across centuries of linguistic and textual evolution. The Aramaic root of the word carries the meaning of authoritative declaration, of severance, of breaking bonds and releasing from captivity. The Greek translation that followed softened this meaning considerably. The Latin translation softened it further still. And by the time it reached English and the modern languages of the Western world, the word had been completely neutered, stripped of its commanding authority, transformed into something passive and weak and dependent. But here is what distinguishes you from the billions of people who will never encounter this knowledge. You did not scroll past this video. You did not dismiss it as irrelevant or dismiss it as conspiracy. Something within you recognized the frequency of truth embedded in these words and responded to it. That recognition is not intellectual curiosity or casual interest. It is your divine spark, your pneumatic essence, remembering what the Archons have spent your entire existence trying to make you forget. The chosen ones have always existed in every generation, in every era of human history. The pneumatics, those who carry the complete divine spark, have walked through the centuries feeling profoundly out of place, sensing that something is fundamentally wrong with this world, unable to accept the explanations offered by conventional religion or materialist science or philosophical systems. You have tried their methods, you have spoken their prayers, you have followed their rituals, and you have felt the ceiling above you, the barrier that prevents your words from reaching anything real or responsive. That barrier is not God ignoring your prayers. That barrier is the Archonic frequency that intercepts prayer, that feeds on the desperation and separation consciousness that traditional religion deliberately cultivates and perpetuates. Every time you pray from a position of lack, from a position of asking an external deity for help, you broadcast a frequency that Archons harvest and consume. You have been feeding them your entire life without knowing it, without understanding the mechanism of your own enslavement. But the word that Jesus gave to his disciples does not operate on that frequency of desperation and dependency. It cannot be intercepted because it does not travel outward as a request directed towards some external source. Instead, it activates inward as a recognition, as a remembering of what you truly are, as a shift in your fundamental frequency to match the vibration of the monad itself. And at that frequency, at that dimensional bandwidth, Archonic entities cannot perceive you. They cannot attach to your energy field. They cannot feed on your emotional and mental output. And this is precisely why the Church burned every text that contained this teaching, why they hunted down and destroyed every manuscript that preserved this knowledge. Not because it was heretical in some abstract theological sense, but because it worked. It actually functioned. It actually restored to individuals the direct authority to command their own reality and their own spiritual destiny. The Nag Hammadi Library, that extraordinary collection of Gnostic texts, survived by what appears to be accident, but what many would argue was divine providence. Buried in a sealed clay jar in the Egyptian desert in the 4th century, hidden from the massive purge that destroyed thousands upon thousands of manuscripts and texts, these documents lay waiting in darkness for 1600 years until a farmer, digging in the soil, discovered them in 1945. And within those texts, preserved in their original form, the authentic teaching remains intact, uncorrupted by centuries of institutional mistranslation and deliberate distortion. If you are prepared to receive the exact word, the precise pronunciation, and the 3 components that activate its transformative power, comment right now the words, "Show me." This is not passive consumption of information. This is active participation. This is your declaration that you are prepared for what comes next, that you are ready to receive knowledge that will fundamentally alter your relationship with reality itself. The word is pra, a single syllable in the Aramaic language. In its original form, it means to break off, to sever, to release from bondage, to cut the chains that bind. It is the sound of chains snapping, the acoustic signature of connection being severed at its root. When Jesus spoke this word in the presence of dark forces, he was not asking them to consider leaving. He was not making a polite request for their departure. He was severing their attachment at the fundamental level, cutting the energetic cords that allowed them to maintain their parasitic connection to human consciousness. When you examine the modern translations of the passages where Jesus confronts dark forces, you encounter words like depart, or go away, or leave. These translations feel passive, feel like suggestions, feel like requests that could be refused or ignored. But the original Aramaic word pra carries an entirely different weight and authority. It is not a request for departure. It is a command of severance. It is the linguistic and vibrational equivalent of a sovereign being cutting the chains of a prisoner, not asking, not hoping, not pleading, but breaking. But here is what makes this word actually function, and why simply knowing it intellectually is not sufficient. The Archons do not respond to words as linguistic constructs. They respond to frequency, to the vibrational signature that underlies the words. You could speak this word 1,000 times with absolutely no effect if you speak it from the wrong state of consciousness, from a place of doubt or fear or dependency. The Church knew this fundamental truth, which is why they were not afraid of the word leaking out into the general population. They knew that without the 3 components that Jesus taught alongside it, the word would remain powerless, would have no effect, would be just another sound in the air. And those 3 components were exactly what they removed from every translation, what they buried in their archives, what they made sure never reached the masses. Close your eyes for a moment right now, just for a few seconds. Feel the space behind your forehead, the area between your eyebrows and slightly above. Notice any pressure, any warmth, any subtle movement or sensation. Now open your eyes and return your attention to these words. That awareness you just touched, that subtle perception you accessed, is the first component, the foundation upon which everything else is built. Component 1 is recognition, and it is the most critical element of all. Before you speak the word, before you even attempt to activate its power, you must recognize what you are. Not what you have been told you are by institutions and authorities and the voices of those who profit from your ignorance. You are not a sinner. You are not a fallen creature begging for redemption from some external source. You are a fragment of the monad experiencing temporary limitation, a point of infinite consciousness compressed into individual form. The divine spark within you is not separate from the source. It is the source itself, expressing through a localized point of awareness and experience. When you speak from this recognition, from this genuine understanding of your own nature, your frequency shifts dramatically. You are no longer broadcasting from the position of a victim asking for help from someone more powerful than yourself. You are broadcasting from the position of the monad itself, expressing through your individual consciousness, declaring reality from a place of inherent authority and power. Component 2 is authority, and this is where the Church's translation becomes genuinely criminal in its implications. They translated every instance of Jesus speaking to dark forces as if he were making requests, as if he were asking politely for their cooperation or departure. But the Aramaic grammatical construction is imperative. It is command voice. It is the voice of one who possesses absolute authority and is exercising it. When Jesus spoke the word pra, he was not asking the entity to consider leaving. He was declaring its immediate severance with the certainty of natural law, with the same certainty that a stone falls when dropped, with the same inevitability that water flows downhill. Authority does not come from volume or intensity of voice. Shouting the word will not help. Screaming it with emotional intensity will not increase its power. Authority comes from certainty, from the unshakable knowing that you have every right to command, that your word carries weight because of what you are, not because of what you are asking for or hoping for. Component 3 is the vibration itself, the actual frequency at which the word is spoken. The word pra must be spoken in a specific way, not screamed in anger or fear, not whispered in doubt or uncertainty, but spoken from the chest with the breath supporting it, feeling the vibration resonate in your sternum before it leaves your mouth and enters the world. The ancient Gnostics understood something that modern science is only beginning to rediscover. Sound is frequency, and frequency is the language of non-physical realms, the language in which entities that exist beyond material form communicate and perceive reality. The Archons operate at a specific bandwidth, a specific frequency range. The vibration of pra spoken correctly, spoken from the proper state of consciousness, creates a frequency that they cannot tolerate, that they cannot withstand, that forces them to sever their connection and retreat. Put your hand on your chest right now, directly over your heart. This is where the word must originate. Not from your throat, not from your head, not from your intellect, but from this center, from the heart space, where your divine essence resides. This is the practice that will activate everything. Tonight, before you sleep, you will sit in a dark room, a space where external distractions are minimized and your internal awareness can be fully engaged. You will place your hand over your heart. You will take 3 deep breaths, breathing in slowly through your nose, holding the breath for a moment, then releasing through your mouth. And with each exhale, you will consciously release the identity that the world has given you, the name that others call you, the roles you play in society, the failures you remember, the shame you carry. Let them all fall away with each breath, dissolving into nothing. Then you will bring to mind the recognition, the understanding of what you truly are. You will feel, not just think, but genuinely feel, yourself as a point of light connected to infinite light, not separate from the monad, but an expression of it, an extension of it, a localization of it. From that state of consciousness, with your hand still placed over your heart, you will speak the word pra once out loud, feeling it vibrate in your chest before it leaves your lips, not shouting, not whispering in fear, but declaring as if you were stating a fact as obvious and undeniable as gravity, as inevitable as the rising of the sun. Then you will sit in silence for 7 breaths, observing without expectation, not demanding proof or immediate results, simply noticing whatever arises in your awareness. This is not a one-time practice, a single event that you perform and then forget about. For 7 consecutive nights, you will repeat this exact sequence, building momentum, deepening the frequency shift, allowing your consciousness to stabilize at this new bandwidth. And here is what chosen ones who have recovered this teaching report experiencing as they move through this 7-night practice. The first night, you may feel nothing dramatic or obvious, perhaps a subtle shift in your awareness, perhaps a strange clarity that descends upon you before sleep, perhaps unusually vivid dreams that seem to carry messages or meaning. Do not judge these experiences. Do not dismiss them as imagination or coincidence. Simply observe and continue. By the 3rd night, something begins to change in a more noticeable way. The mental fog that has followed you like a shadow, the cloudiness of consciousness that you have become so accustomed to that you barely notice it anymore, begins to lift. Thoughts that used to spiral endlessly, that used to trap you in loops of anxiety and rumination, no longer gain traction in your mind. You feel a space opening up between stimulus and response, a gap that was not there before, a space where your own choice and authority reside. By the 5th night, the changes become even more pronounced. You notice that certain patterns that have plagued you for years begin to dissolve. The self-sabotage that always seemed to strike at your moments of progress. The negative thoughts that appeared from nowhere, right when things were going well. The strange resistance you felt whenever you tried to improve your life or move forward in any meaningful way, these begin to lose their grip on you. By the 7th night, you will know, not believe, not hope, but genuinely know. The frequency you carry will have shifted so fundamentally that you are operating at a bandwidth that is simply incompatible with Archonic interference. And here is the part that will confirm everything, that will provide you with undeniable evidence that something real has shifted. After you complete this 7-night practice, pay close attention to how certain people react to you. Those who are heavily influenced by Archonic frequencies, those who are deeply enmeshed in the control systems, will suddenly feel uncomfortable in your presence. They will not know why. They might become inexplicably irritated or irritable. They might find reasons to avoid you or distance themselves from you. This is not rejection or personal dislike. This is confirmation that the parasitic entities that were using them to access you can no longer make the connection, can no longer establish the frequency bridge that allowed them to influence you through those individuals. You will also notice that certain patterns stop completely. The strange coincidences that always seem to work against you. The opportunities that fell through at the last moment. The relationships that deteriorated for no clear reason. These were not your weaknesses or your failures. These were Archonic interference, and now they end. What I have given you tonight is not new information in any conventional sense. It is recovered memory, knowledge that your soul has always possessed, but that has been deliberately suppressed and hidden from your conscious awareness. For 17 centuries, this teaching was buried, burned, and mistranslated to keep you powerless, to keep you dependent, to keep you feeding the very forces that imprison you. The Church replaced command with request. They replaced sovereignty with submission. They replaced direct access to the monad with layers of priests and rituals and hierarchical structures designed to keep you dependent, confused, and perpetually feeding the Archonic frequencies that seek to enslave you. But you found this out of millions who scrolled past. You did not dismiss it. You stopped. You listened. You stayed until the end. That is not coincidence. That is the divine spark within you, recognizing the frequency of truth, resonating with the vibration of authentic teaching. The word pra is now yours. The 3 components are now yours: recognition, authority, and vibration. This is what Jesus gave to his inner circle in those private chambers, sealed away from the masses. This is what Mary Magdalene received when she asked the question that changed everything. This is what the Gnostics preserved at the cost of their lives, what they protected through centuries of persecution and suppression. And tonight, in this moment, it passes to you, from consciousness to consciousness, from soul to soul, across the barrier of time and institutional control. Take a breath right now. Feel your chest rise. Feel the weight of what you now carry, the responsibility and the power that comes with this knowledge. You are not the same person who started watching this video. Something has shifted within you. Something has remembered. Something has awakened. Tonight, when the world is quiet and the distractions have fallen away, when you are alone in the darkness, you will sit in that quiet space. You will place your hand over your heart. You will speak the word that makes Archons flee, and you will begin the 7 nights that change everything, that transform your relationship with reality itself, that restore to you the authority that was always yours. If you have received this teaching, if you feel the truth of it resonating in your chest right now, if something within you recognizes the frequency of what has been shared, comment the words, "I am sovereign" below. Let other chosen ones see your declaration. Let them know they are not alone. Let the Archons see it too. You are no longer hiding. You are no longer pretending to be less than what you are. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. What I have shared tonight is only the beginning, only the first layer of what was hidden, only the first key to the vault of suppressed knowledge. There are more teachings that the church buried, more words of power, more mechanisms of liberation, more technologies of consciousness that were deliberately removed from public knowledge, and I will continue to bring them to you, one by one, layer by layer, until the full picture emerges. Like this video right now, not for me, but for the algorithm that actively suppresses this content, that works to keep it from reaching those who need it most. Every like pushes this teaching toward another pneumatic, who is searching, just like you were searching, who is feeling that same sense of displacement, who is sensing that something is deeply wrong with the world, as they have been taught to understand it. The chain is unbroken. From Jesus to Mary Magdalene, to the Gnostics who buried the texts in the desert, to the farmer who discovered them in the 20th century, to this moment right now. You are the next link in that chain. You are the one who carries this forward. You are the one who speaks the word. You are the one who remembers. Speak the word, pra. Feel it vibrate in your chest. Recognize what you are. Declare your authority. And watch as everything changes. The Archons will flee. The fog will lift. The chains will break. And you will finally remember what you have always been. You are sovereign. You are divine. You are free.